Good morning, everybody. Excited to see you all here today. Happy to have you with us for Trendspotting 2026, and happy to have our panel with us as well. My name is Doug Dixon. I'm secretary and co-founder of the Encore network, and I want to remind you that this is a meeting, not a webinar, so we appreciate your staying on mute so that any background noises don't distract from the conversation, the panelists, what they have to say. We will be sharing a copy of the recording. This is being recorded today. We'll be sharing that after the meeting ends. So sometime later this week, you'll receive that in the mail, along with information about our panelists and any other relevant resources that come up in the conversation today. We will have an opportunity to take your questions later in the program. But if you have questions along the way, enter them into the chat. Put a Q or a question next to your question so that we can pick that out from the comments, and we'll either take those questions as we go, or we'll come back to them at the end of the program when we officially launch into the Q&A section. We also encourage you to use the chat to provide information about who you are, where you are, with whom you're affiliated, so that others that you might want to be in contact with or that want to be in contact with you can do that. So use the chat to get acquainted, to make connections, and to continue this conversation after we're finished today. I do want to acknowledge our sponsor today, which is the Life Planning Network. The Life Planning Network has been around for 23 years. They have a tremendous legacy in the field of retirement transition and aging, and all of the things that are relevant to the work that we do in the Encore network as well. And as of January 1st, the Life Planning Network and the Encore Network joined forces to become one, and we're very appreciative of their work over the years and the opportunity to continue that work and legacy going forward. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderator of today's program, Rich Eisenberg, who comes to us with many, many years of journalism and writing and expertise in a range of areas that we'll be talking about today. He was the former editor of Next Avenue before he began his unretirement career, which I'm sure he can speak to you more about. So over to you, Rich, and Rich will start us off and introduce the other panelists.
Well, hi, thank you, Doug, and great to see everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to the Encore Network for having us here for Trendspotting 2026, what 2025 taught us and what's coming next, about the trends that are shaping work, aging, and the economy. For those of you who joined us at Trendspotting 2025, welcome back. For those of you who did not, thanks for coming. We've got a lot to talk about in the hour that we have together, and we have three smarties, as Doug mentioned. They are Catherine Collinson of the Transamerica Institute and the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, which you probably know does great work about workers, employers, and retirement. Kerry Hannon, the Yahoo personal finance columnist who specializes in older workers and retirement and many other things. And she's the co-author of the terrific new book, Retirement Bites, a Gen X Guide to Securing Your Financial Future. Here it is. And Chris Farrell, the Marketplace Senior Economics Contributor for American Public Radio and author of the books Purpose and a Paycheck and Unretirement. The way it's going to work is we're going to spend the first 10 minutes talking about 2025, and then 30 minutes about what's happening and what we think looks ahead for 2026. And then we'll have 10 minutes at the end to answer your questions. So as Doug said, please put them into chat. We'll get to as many of those as we can. Before I turn to Catherine, Kerry, and Chris, I thought maybe I would set the stage a little bit for where I think things are for work, aging, and the economy. Most workers are satisfied with their jobs, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. And the overall unemployment rate right now is about 4.4%, which is higher than it was in 2023 and 2024. But the unemployment rate for people 55 and older is about 3%. And for people 65 and older, it's just 2.6%, which sounds pretty good, but I think our panelists may have some thoughts about what's behind those numbers. Over 1.2 million people lost their jobs last year, the most since the pandemic. Many of those were at private companies, but many, as you know, were people who worked for the federal government. And I saw a study recently from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. It found that 30% of workers, 3-0, have seen layoffs or reduced hours where they work in the past 12 months. That's up from 2024. And 37% have seen hiring freezes, which is up from 33% in 2024. So not such great news there. Close to a third of job seekers aged 55 and older are what's called long-term unemployed, which means they've been out of work for 6 months or longer. We'll talk about that. There still seems to be quite a lot of ageism by employers, making it hard for people in their 50s and older to get hired. I just read an excellent book that I'd recommend. It's about this, called Too Good to Get Hired, by Isaiah Hankel. And it's about how so many older job seekers are considered overqualified by employers, but overqualified is really just a euphemism. And then the last thing I'll mention is the Trump administration and Congress have been cutting or proposing cuts at the Small Business Administration and programs that help older Americans start or grow businesses. So that's making it a little tougher to become an entrepreneur. So with all that said, let me now turn to the panel. Catherine, Chris, and Kerry, what did you see last year? And if you saw any bright spots, we'd love to hear about them. Catherine, maybe you want to start.
Sure. Thank you, Rich. You've summed up 2025 very, very well. And I think it's going to take a long time for us to really process how profound the changes that we've seen in 2025, many of which will carry into 2026 and beyond. Many of them public policy driven in changes in the economy. But we also see other things happening. As each day passes, we all get a day older, and our population is aging. The baby boomers and Gen X now coming up behind them. The oldest Gen Xers are now 60, which is a big milestone birthday. And we are seeing people staying in the workforce longer, or at least attempting to do so. But the job climate is there's a couple of ways we could look at it. We could look at it as difficult because there's been so many disruptions, or we can wear our optimist hat, which I prefer to do, and that is change brings opportunity. So that's where I'm going to want to focus my comments, because I do see bright spots. And if you can figure out how to navigate those changes and find a little sliver, it may be something entirely new and different, but I believe there's opportunities out there.
Before I turn to Chris and Kerry, I just want to ask Catherine about some of the research you've done at Transamerica. I know you ask workers and employers a lot of questions, and last year there were some really interesting differences between what you were hearing from women and men and from Gen Xers and boomers. Anything you want to say about the research?
Yeah, a couple of things. So an overarching trend we've seen over the years is, looking back over a decade, that people in the workforce are looking to extend their working years, work beyond traditional retirement age, and continued work, say part-time in retirement. And we see those commonly among both women and men. And then generationally, we are seeing some really important differences in what I would call cautionary tales between boomers and Gen Xers, because boomers have blazed the trail in so many ways and looking to work longer, retire later. But we released a report on retirees last month, and the median age that retirees retired is still just 62. And more than half retired sooner than planned. oftentimes due to either personal health issues or employment-related issues. Not because they won the Powerball or they had the financial wherewithal. So that's something as we think about working longer and working into the future, how do we safeguard not only our health, but our employability? And these are
Great.
important lessons for Gen X because they've still got more time.
Thank you. So, Chris, let me ask you, how did 2025 look to you? What caught your eye?
So a couple things caught my eye. I mean, 2025, if you look at the macroeconomic numbers, were pretty good. As you mentioned, the unemployment rate, yes, it climbed up a little, but it's still 4.4%. The economy continued to grow. Stock market went to a record high. If you own your own home, you've probably built up a lot of equity in that home. And so as we go into 2026, there's some reasons why and then of course you had the wild card that kind of overhangs everything, which is this massive investment boom in artificial intelligence, sort of building the artificial intelligence infrastructure. And the investment was so big that that's basically what drove the economy ahead, if you just look at that investment. But I think off of what Catherine was saying, as we go into 2026, so none of just because we've gone the calendar year, nothing's changed overnight. People you still have those trends in place, but this frozen labor market is a growing concern. And you mentioned earlier, Rich, about the long-term unemployed. So younger people graduating from college are having a hard time getting work or the kind of work that they want to be doing. And older people who lose their jobs are very quickly joining the ranks of the long-term unemployed, and that number has been climbing. However, the other side of this frozen labor market is that if you have your job, you've been keeping it, but people aren't leaving their jobs either. So the underlying dynamism of the labor market as we go into 2026 really concerns me. And the other thing that concerns me is the sort of radical uncertainties that are out there. And Greenland, tariffs, mass deportations. And, I'm in Minnesota, and so I've been doing reporting on the effect of the mass deportations on the Minnesota economy. And basically, a lot of businesses, they've shrunk their hours. They're not hiring. They're not investing. And many of them are closed at this point. These are mostly small businesses. So we're in an environment where I think the real thing to focus on is the labor market, and there are some weaknesses in the labor market. But if you have a job right now and you're an older worker, the fact of the matter is you're probably a pretty valuable employee.
Before I turn to Kerry, Chris, what did you see last year for older entrepreneurs and people starting businesses or growing businesses? Was it a good time, not so good? What was going on?
I think this trend is growing, and it was a good time. And a lot of it has to do with the difficulties, as you mentioned earlier, Rich, about ageism, and the difficulties people have getting through the algorithms. And everybody has trouble getting through the algorithms. But also, how much more do you want to do 50 hours of work for 40 hours pay? Or, do you want to still be doing what you've been doing? So, and there are more resources to tap into. The federal government has cut back on its, but in many communities, they're co-sharing workspaces, they're places where people are gathering. So there are a lot of resources out there, the Kaufman Foundation. And so I think this bringing in some income, start being self-employed. I think what we are seeing is a lot of solopreneurship, and that is continuing to grow. Technology has made that somewhat easier. So that is one of those trends that will continue to grow, continue to unfold, and it's something to keep a very close eye at. And you said, well, what are you optimistic about? That to me is probably the thing to be the most optimistic about. It may be a negative reason why you're doing it. You may have lost your job and you didn't want to lose your job. You may have wanted to get another job. You're not getting another job, but nonetheless, this is a viable option for many people.
Thank you. And Kerry, how did 2025 look to you, and what did you see happening for older workers and older job seekers?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I just have to piggyback on what the other two have said. I didn't see anything really different than they did. I mean, there's clearly lots of layoffs, particularly in Washington, D.C., where I am. There were people taking early retirements, maybe at a faster rate than previously. There's a sense of precarity in the air. I mean, people are just a bit nervous, like eggshells, if they're still in the workplace. If they're an older worker, they're definitely, just as Chris said, they got it. I mean, if you're there and you've got that job, don't blink, don't let yourself get complacent, because yes, you really are valued at this stage, because there are employers, many are afraid to hire new people at this stage. They don't know where the economy is actually going or what the different rules are going to be moving forward. So they're grateful to have the experienced workers, but at the same time, you as the older worker have got to dig in. You have to, and I've seen this over and over again, adding new skills, reaching out to younger coworkers, building alliances with people, not being afraid of the AI and the new technology. Where I work, AI is the name of the game. I mean, that's the biggest thing going on at my company, but I'm not afraid of it. In fact, I just play around with it. I try to expand how I use it in my own work and get comfortable so I'm not intimidated or fearful of it. And so I can have a discussion with somebody within the company about it in a way that doesn't look like I'm, on another planet. So I think it's really important for older workers to embrace their experience, but also embrace the fact that there are things they don't know, and they need to continue constantly adding new things to their wheelhouse.
We'll come back to AI in a couple of minutes when we talk about 2026. But Kerry, since you did write that great book about Gen X, any trends you noticed last year, 2025, particularly for people in their 40s and 50s, Gen Xers, and maybe different ones than for boomers in their 60s and 70s?
Well, I absolutely loved what Catherine said about, boomers, tried to get this path going of working longer, but ultimately many do end up stepping out of the workplace and finding it pretty difficult to get traction to get back in. But Gen Xers have that chance to really make it happen. So those who are paying attention. Now, the great thing about Gen Xers is that these folks are at their peak earnings years. I mean, this is really an opportunity not only to sock away money for retirement, but also to really step back and say, how am I doing? What does my financial picture look like? What role does work play for me moving forward? And these are the years that they need to start thinking, okay, what is it I might want to do in this next chapter? And I see them starting to, the older Gen Xers, as they're, have hit 60 or they're mid to late 50s, they're starting to ask themselves those questions. What is it I want to do? What do I need to do to get there? And they've got runway to do that in a really intentional way. So I was really encouraged with the people I talked to who did that. They also, what's so cool about Gen Xers is they're scrappy, they're resilient. These are the ones that drank, water straight from the hose and rode bikes without helmets, and they get it done. I think this generation is going to solve some of these problems on a different level. They're very independent. So this idea of entrepreneurship, big deal in this generation. I heard a lot about that when I was out reporting that book. This is something they yearn to control their own destiny. So there's a lot of talk about, if they haven't already started a side gig, of moving in that direction. But the thing is, the most important thing I tell the Gen Xers that I spoke to about getting control of their financial futures, which work is a piece of, is if they own their own business, they actually need to have an exit plan. They have to start thinking about, what's my business valued at? Is this my retirement plan? How long do I want to stay here? They also need to, at this stage, they've had lifestyle creep, right? They're earning some money. They may not even know how they're spending their money right now. So I always, am encouraging them, and I see this happening. Go back, do that budget. Where's your money actually going to? Nobody wants to do this, but what role is continuing to work going to play in your future? Are you financially secure? And where can you cut back now to prepare? And the final piece of that, Rich, is they're starting to think about, where might I want to live? Do I want to relocate? And they have time now to play it out, to go work in different places remotely, whatever it might be, to see if there's another part of the country where the cost of living is a bit different, or an area that offers more work opportunities for what they might want to do. But so these are the questions that I see Gen X starting to ask. And I feel hopeful for this generation.
Well, happy to hear that. So let's turn to 2026. And Kerry, while we're talking, maybe why don't you just expand on sort of how you think the year looks and the year ahead for Gen Xers and also for boomers too. And I'll preface that by saying, if those layoffs that we saw last year continue this year, the generation I'm particularly concerned about is Gen X because many of them are going to be wanting full-time jobs, maybe more so than boomers, and finding a full-time job when you're in your late 40s and 50s can be particularly hard. And I'm wondering, what you think things look like this year. Am I being too pessimistic, or are you nervous too?
No, that's you, Rich. It's fine. I get it. On the other side of the coin, I think that, yes, I do believe that I think it's going to be a rough year. Honestly, I don't see an end to belt tightening with companies, with, the impact of tariffs on different business, particularly small businesses. The immigration issue is huge. I think there's going to be uncertainty throughout this year. I don't think we're going to see a major change in this trend that we saw through 2025. But what I do think, if you are Gen X and you've been and I do think a lot of younger workers have been let go more than the older cohort. But that said, if you were one of them, the point is, like in most of the advice we've always given people, is you're not going to find that job by sending a resume out virtually. It isn't going to happen. The job board's not going to find that job for you. It is really buttoning down and digging down. Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? And reaching out, because your network, as I say, networking is one letter away from not working. All of you have heard me say that many times, but it is one of my favorite lines. And it's really just reaching out and telling everyone you're looking for something, because your peers and people that, and frankly, if you've built those intergenerational connections, excellent, good for you, because they may be in a position to bring you on board. But it's going to be, everyone's situation is going to be different, but I think it's going to rely very heavily on who you know, having your skills up to date, and being able to step in and do the job today, not any on-ramping, no period where you can just get used to what you're doing. You got to jump in and be there today. So I do think the opportunities may not be as rich as we'd like them to be, but I think they will be out there. And as we know, the industries like healthcare, education, tech, there are jobs there. It's how you slice or dice it. How do your skills translate to some of these opportunities? And being open-minded. Being open-minded about what it is you want to do work-wise. You have to really be willing to try something new and see what happens.
I'll just pause for a second to remind people to please stay on mute if you would, and also to please keep putting your questions in chat. I've seen a few. I'm scribbling them down, and we'll get to more of them as well. Kerry, before I turn to Chris, I want to ask you about how do you think things look for boomers this year? They're in their 60s and 70s. Some are turning 80. A lot of them still want to work in some way or another, maybe full-time, but often part-time, maybe in retirement like I'm doing. Do you think they'll be able to? And what would you suggest?
I do. I think they're dancing as fast as they can. We're lucky that remote work has become part of the fabric of the workplace. And again, and we may talk about more later, contract work is expanded. All of this coming out of the pandemic. But I still think it's going to take a lot of chutzpah, a lot of innovative thinking on your own part, and reaching out to people to see where you can be of value. So I do think boomers, and particularly, need to be very cautious of being current with their skills, and if they want to stay in the job, also having this discussion. And Catherine's research knows a little bit more about this, but I've seen it anecdotally, is there truly are more companies that are offering a phased retirement. It's still maybe not as formal as one might expect you'd want it to be, but that's expensive for companies to do. But I do hear about it. I get lots of people pinging me about, oh, my company started doing this, or I've been able to do that to phase back. So for boomers, this would be an area to explore, but you have to do it fairly carefully.
And in case people don't know, explain what a phased retirement means.
Well, will you gradually step back from the full, pedal to the metal to, taking on fewer projects or taking on just key projects that maybe nobody else wants to do, but you can jump in and really give it your full attention. So it's lowering the workload or the time required in the position in a steady sort of downward step out, but it's not an immediately turning of the switch.
Chris, I want to go back to you and ask you about older workers and older entrepreneurs. I'm wondering how you think things are looking for them this year and what's your advice? Is this going to be a good time or a tough time to start a business or grow a business?
So I think it's going to, I would, building off what Kerry is saying, there's a lot is going to be very, very difficult with this economy. And it may be sort of where you are at what place. But I think overall, the trends that are unfolding with this frozen labor market is it's probably a good environment for people who are starting their own business or people who might want to, Kerry mentioned phased retirement, perhaps become a boomerang employee, a part-time boomerang employee. I mean, one of the best ways to continue working is you might retire, come back to your previous company. That used to be something companies would avoid. There was a stigma attached to it. I think that has changed dramatically because now you know who this person is, you know what they can do. You're filling in on vacations, you're filling in on various tasks. You might be helping out on various projects. Maybe it's a contract. Looking at your previous employer, especially if it's a larger business. And then if you're starting your own business, look, you're building on your skills, your knowledge, your experience, the people the industry that you're in, and everybody is going to be looking to tighten their budgets, right? Households are tightening their budgets, businesses are tightening their budgets, and they're not hiring as much, but tasks are still happening. Contracts are still going through. You still got to make money. So I think in that sort of entrepreneurial side of the economy, tough times lead to a lot of opportunities. You got to hustle more for pay. You got to hustle more to get paid. So there's that sort of aspect of things. But I think you can really help solve a lot of employers' problems, and they're not taking somebody on full-time employee with their assuming it's a company that's offering benefits. They're working with someone that they know or someone they met at various conferences or someone who was to be a vendor or a supplier. Now you're helping them solve the various problems. And I do think it is actually a growth opportunity. It probably is a good environment to be starting a business for basically what's a bad reason. It's a frozen labor market.
Yeah. And given so much concern about affordability these days, I would think starting a business that can help save people money might be a good thing to be thinking about doing.
Right, because one of the key things is do they trust you to do the job, right? So that's what you're selling. I can do this job. Here's the contract. I'll do it efficiently. I know either I used to work for you, or I used to work for your competitors, or I was in this industry. And yes, so and then you build up your reputation, you build up your business, and as Kerry was mentioning, the key to all of this is networking before you go off on your own if you can. And the other thing that I'd emphasize with all the uncertainties with 2026, and this is always true, I love trying to figure out what's going on with this economy. What is the outlook for the economy? What's the outlook for the labor market? What might happen? But the thing is, I can't control the stock market. I can't control what Donald Trump is going to do. I can't control what various businesses are going to do, but you can plan ahead. And if you think you're in and your environment, your industry. If there's a vulnerability there, start planning ahead. What do I want to do next? If you're unhappy in your job, okay, you stay with your job because it's helping you pay the bills, but you also are realizing time is getting shorter. So what it is that you want to do. So I'd really emphasize 2026. If you're on the fence, if you're nervous, if you don't know what's going on, 2026 really is a year to plan, and you can control with planning. And you can control reaching out to your network, and you can control coming up with a budget, and you can control, hey, if I make this amount of money and I think I've got some good relationships here, then I'm going to be okay financially. Now, not making as much as I did before, but I kind of might like this. And then there's all the evidence that if you add a couple of extra years and you're enjoying what you're doing, financially, you end up kind of in the same place. And psychologically and emotionally, you're in a much better place.
Chris, you've also written a lot about helping people find meaning and purpose through work as they get older, sometimes through Encore careers for the public good. I'm wondering, what do you think we'll see on that front in 2026 and also volunteering?
So I don't know if you noticed, but there's a whole new slew of books are coming out, and they're all emphasizing the risk to loneliness, the risk to social isolation. And what they're also emphasizing is the one thing that we really know that helps people age well, age healthy, age with a vibrant attitude is if they have connections, and not just connections with their peers, but intergenerational connections. And work is one way where you have connections. And most workplaces, by definition, are intergenerational. And most workplaces, and one of the reasons why I think it's important, is you have to learn new technologies. You have to engage with people. You have to get up in the morning and get dressed, and brush your teeth, and be presentable. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons the workplace is a community. It's not for everybody. Say if people can reach a point where they just go, this is not for me. Or the workplace may decide, we're not going to be hiring you. I mean, I recognize that. But if we think about whatever it is you're planning ahead on, you want to make sure you have connections, and the workplace is that community. Now, the alternative for many people is volunteering, right? And there, I think you do want to be equally systematic. I don't know. I mean, I've come across so many people, and this is anecdotal. They think they're retired, they're going to volunteer. And it turns out it's not very satisfying because, yes, they can do some stuff, but you're checking in people as they come in, to an event, and you're participating in organizations that you like, but you're not really using any of your knowledge, your skill, your experience in this volunteering effort. So I think if volunteering is what you want to be doing, and you have the financial resources that this can be your major focus, you still want to plan ahead. You still want to be systematic. And anybody who works in a nonprofit organization knows there can be nonprofits that they're in a sector that is just wonderful, and they can be managed miserably. So you want to learn, volunteer, find out, is this the kind of place that I want to hang out? Are these the people I want to hang out with? And if it turns out that it's not, the thing is you've met some other people and they'll say, oh, you are interested in this area, but you don't want to stay here. You should go talk to so-and-so. So volunteering, there are going to be lots of opportunities because the volunteer sector is overwhelmed right now. The government's pulling back on so many areas. The funding is pulling back in so many areas. Nonprofits are trying to move in. So I think the volunteering opportunities are going to be enormous. The volunteering opportunities are going to be needed, but you still need to plan ahead and be systematic in order to get that fulfillment, in order that you feel like I have that purpose, I have that meaning. And you know what? When I show up here, I'm adding value. I'm getting some, but I'm getting more out of it than I'm putting in.
Yeah, I'm volunteering myself on the weekends at a place where the thing I like most about it is that there are younger people volunteering and older people. So to your point, there's the connection aspect of being with younger and older people together. And then I also joined a board for a group that I'd been a member of for a while and felt like, well, this is the time I had the time to try to give back and be helpful. And so I would encourage people, if they have the time, to think about maybe joining a board or volunteering at a place where you really believe in the mission. Catherine, let me go back to you now. I'm wondering, what are you hearing from employers about things that are particularly interesting to older workers and job seekers? I'm thinking about, we talked about phased retirement, maybe that, but also flexible hours, remote work. Is this going to be a good year for those kinds of things, or not so great, or what?
I'm bullish on it. Is we've looked and we've been surveying employers for many years and looking at their age friendliness. And we're seeing progress. One of the indicators that came up that Kerry had touched on, we're seeing a growing numbers of offering phased retirement. I think that's a really good sign. We're not there yet at 100%, but we're seeing the numbers trending in the right direction. and also considering, opening hearts and minds to older workers and older job seekers. I share everyone's concerns about the online job board and algorithms not being helpful. I'm not sure they're helpful for people, job seekers of any age at this point, but especially for older workers. But we're seeing the numbers trend in the right direction. Employers recognizing the value and talent and expertise that older workers bring. Now, for job seekers, that doesn't mean it's an easy slam dunk, but I think the tides have turned, and I think that we are looking at it being easier in the future than it has been in the past. And I also believe that we've got demographics in our favor. We've got an aging population, an aging workforce, and fewer younger workers. And many baby boomers, if they have not retired, they will be retiring, and employers are gonna need to fill those shoes. So I'm bullish on it. The one caveat is, because we've all seen the news and headlines, employers pulling back, and that may have been 100% virtual and bringing people back to the office. I think that's going to be a reality for specific types of industries, specific jobs, professions that require on-site presence. But I still think there's going to be plenty of flexible opportunities as well.
I was going to ask you about that because I do see more employers, big companies in certain industries, but quite a few that are insisting that employees come back to work in person, if not 5 days a week, then at least 3 days a week, but sometimes 5. And I think there are a lot of older job seekers and older workers who think, I really don't want to do that. I really want to keep working, but I don't want to go into an office anymore. And I'm wondering, is this a trend that is working against some older job seekers?
Or job seekers that don't want to be in an office environment. And again, I think it's up to the job seeker. Employment is, it's a two-way street. And for somebody to if it requires being there full time, 5 days a week, then maybe it's not the right opportunity for them. From an employer's perspective, there are employers, they're white collar industries, very concerned about cybersecurity and having their technology networks locked down and have more control than if in a totally virtual environment. But there's still also plenty of opportunities out there for hybrid work and for remote work. However, one of the big themes that we've had in this conversation is, given the amount of disruption and so many factors at work and so many changes underway, that it's up to each and every one of us to be doing our homework. And it's going to be requiring more homework probably in the future, ferreting out opportunities than it has been in the past. But there's going to be new opportunities, and I think people, open heart, open mind, and a lot of focus on the homework. I think they're going to find opportunities that they didn't know existed before.
So you've talked about why job boards are not very useful these days. I'm wondering what would be, for all three of you, your top tip for people over 50 who will be looking for jobs this year? What should they be doing to try to find those jobs? Maybe Kerry, do you want to start, and then Chris, and then Catherine?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, what do you want to do? Who would you like to work for? Second thing, then go to that company or that nonprofit's website and see what jobs they have posted. Number 3, if it's the company that you love their mission, you really would, this is where you see yourself, reach out, see, LinkedIn is a great resource for us. Look and see, how are you connected to anyone who works there that might be able to give you the inside scoop on if something's coming up, if there are any opportunities that they see there, who you might be able to talk to. So it's the homework stuff Catherine was just talking about, but it's really understanding what is motivating you, then who narrow it down to maybe 10 employers or nonprofits that would be your like ideal job, and then go for it. Really see who you know, align your resume to match with any opportunities they have. That what skill set you have would pair with what they have open. Those are the kinds of proactive things you can do to launch into this without being dependent on the job boards. I think we also do hear a lot about jobs word of mouth or through other places. Maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's other social media sources that I know on LinkedIn, a lot of folks I know, colleagues I know, they post opportunities at their companies all the time. And it's not that something that I'm getting a LinkedIn beep that I've got, that there's a job open that matches my skills, but it's actually someone I know, I respect, has put up an opportunity, and I can go to them and say, hey, what do you know about this?
Chris, what's your advice for older job seekers? And I'm particularly interested if you have any thoughts for the long-term unemployed, people who've been looking for a while and have not found anything.
So I think, we're all kind of going to echo the same points, which the core about it is networking. So agreeing with everything that Kerry just said. So I guess what I would add to that is your network will help you find a job, but your network can also help you figure out what it is you want to do next. And, when we work in companies, they're sort of acceptable. Oh, that's a job I would take, or that's a job you would move to. But the advantage of tapping your network, you can broaden your horizons about what might be possible. We all hear this thing about it's not your job title, it's what are your skills. Well, that level of introspection is not that easy for a lot of people. So if you're in this process and you're not dealing with it by necessity, you've lost your job, you've been laid off, but you want to be doing your homework, tap into your net. What am I good at? What do you think are my skills? What do you think I'd be good at doing? And sort of really explore the possibilities of what it is. And then once you sort of settle on something that you think you want to do, then you want to tap into your network for some references, information. And this is where LinkedIn and the job boards and everything can really help you do your research and really understand. They're just valuable research tools, but they're not particularly valuable in getting you to the place that you want to go. And in terms of the long-term unemployed, there you want to tap into, and they're in every community, in the basement of a church or a temple. There are groups who have come together to be looking for jobs, and you support each other, and you have experts coming in. But I think you really don't want to go on that journey alone. You really want to be with people, and there are programs, and it comes up every time. It came out, 28, the 2008, 2009, the Great Recession. And there was a real rise in long-term unemployed, and a lot of stories about local institutions, a lot of them churches or nonprofit organizations, providing a forum for people to come together, share stories, share some expertise. You tap into all the resources that are offered by the state itself. And so the main thing that I think with the long-term unemployed is you don't want to be alone. You do not want to be in that journey alone. It's incredibly depressing. It's very, very hard on your emotions. Obviously, it's hard on your finances. So reach out to these organizations that really have developed the networks that can help you. And at a minimum, you can learn that, hey, I'm not alone. And then some of the stuff that we're talking about, like trying to figure out what you want to do next, that stuff kicks in.
Thank you.
Rich,
Catherine, anything you want to add?
Can I jump in for 1 second, Rich?
Sure.
What Chris was saying is so important that you ask other people what you're good at, because we often don't recognize that in ourselves. The second thing is, another place you can look is your hobbies. It sort of broadens the scope of what a job might be, but if something that is your hobby, you might find a grain of a job opportunity within that group and that community that you might not think about so much. And the final thing is, if you're long-term unemployed, don't sit around sending out resumes on your computer. You have got to show any employer, if you get an interview, they're going to want to know, what have you been doing? So you need to be taking a class. You need to be volunteering. You need to be out in the world and out of your head as one sort of way to look at it. But I think that's very vital to show that you're engaged in the world if you're, facing that long-term unemployment. And that's going to come up as, so what have you been doing?
Thank you. And Catherine, any tips you want to offer for job seekers and particularly long-term unemployed this year?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to flip the script a little bit because I think Kerry and Chris have covered it so well.
Okay.
And just, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So when something is not working, to try something new, and take some chances. The one point I want to make is we're all people. We all have friends. We all probably know somebody or more than one people who are long-term unemployed, and look out after them. Be their cheerleaders, be their vote of confidence, help open doors when possible, be available for coffee and brainstorming, because everybody needs a helping hand from time to time. And it is not personal, but life works in strange ways.
That's true. I have a bunch more questions, but we don't have time. We've got 1 minute before I want to open this up to questions, and I've been seeing some in chat. Feel free to put some in now if you haven't yet. But I guess I have to ask about AI. I think that's the law these days. What do you think AI is going to mean for older workers and older job seekers this year? I wrote a piece recently, and the experts I talked to said that they think older workers might be in greater demand because of AI, because AI tends to do the work of entry-level people, and employers are going to be looking for people with expertise and judgment, which AI does not have, which I found heartening, but I don't know whether to believe it or not. Any of you want to jump in on AI?
Well, I'll jump in and, to one extent, we have no idea how AI is going to affect the labor market. You can come up with a positive story, you can come up with a negative story. But at the period of time that we're in right now, Rich, I think you're absolutely right. It's AI still does a lot of hallucinations. It still makes a lot of mistakes. It does some incredible things. And it's the judgment to be able to say, wait a second, this is wrong. I mean, it was one of the things, the first time I used AI was for a Next Avenue story. And I said, what are the things that people who are starting a business should consider? And I knew the literature well, and it was really good. And then I just edited it, cleaned it up. But and I realized that literature's out there. That literature is highly available. And so it tapped into a good literature. But other times I've done similar experiments and AI has really made some mistakes. And I go, that's wrong. So I just think from a practical level, for a variety of reasons, experience is really valuable at this time, partly because of the uncertainty that's going on. Experience really helps to get through the uncertainty, and partially because of judgment calls that the AI is demanding from its workers.
Barry, Catherine, either of you want to jump in on AI?
Well,
Okay, I'll jump. Oh,
go ahead, Catherine, you're up. Go.
Okay, so I will tell you, I am fascinated by it. I've become kind of obsessed with it, and whenever possible, dropping in on seminars and discussions across industries to hear how people are thinking about it and how they might be using it. And there are so many unknowns. Chris, of course, has touched on the hallucinations, and I'll use some language of as people are using AI for various types of research, we need humans with good BS detectors, because I've seen some wild hallucinations that are just completely off the mark. On the other hand, there's applications of AI that it can do things that humans would never have the time or patience to be able to do, especially assimilating large numbers of data or transactions timely. My take on AI is, I think for putting it for older workers or workers of all ages, again, change brings opportunity in many ways. AI is a solution in search of problems, but the successful application and implementation of AI is all human-centric, figuring out how to use it, where it's beneficial, where it works, where it doesn't work, all that debugging, and institutionalizing it and operationalizing it in businesses. That all takes human brain power. The bots aren't going to figure that out for you.
I saw a story in the Wall Street Journal, I think yesterday or today, that found a pretty big difference between what workers said AI was doing for them at work and what employers said it was doing. Employers said AI is saving so much time and people are so much more productive, and the workers said, no, it's not saving much time at all. Kerry, what do you think about AI for this year? What would you tell our audience?
Well, it's here. I mean, it's not going away, but what always, and this isn't particularly helpful, but when I read these stories about how there are all these job opportunities for older workers to train, the AI to do their jobs or to do this project. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is like this whole idea of, I don't know. It's so against our nature to train our replacements that I guess there are jobs doing that, but it really it just makes me roll my eyes.
Okay, so let me turn to the questions from our audience. I'll go through as many as I saw. If I miss any that panelists or Doug saw, please let me know. And audience, feel free to put some in now while we have a couple minutes left. One question that we saw early on was, which are the industries and professions that are growing or you think may be growing in 2026? And that's for any of you. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, healthcare is number one. I mean, there's just so many ways to slice and dice that, from, caring for an aging population. There's such a wide assortment of roles. You don't have to be, a nurse or a doctor for sure. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities in that wide range of jobs that are, I used to call them, in one of my books, jobs to ride the age wave. And so, jobs people in their 50s and 60s are doing to help care for and make lives better for people 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I think that's going to continue to be a huge job market for people.
Chris,
it's a little bit it's a little scary how dependent we become. If you take a look at the job growth over the past couple of years, I mean, you just start off with healthcare, and now that the market has slowed down, it's really healthcare, and social services. Mm-hmm. So I do think that those will continue to grow. I think there are also opportunities. As always, and I don't think it's just emphasized enough. I know it's not an industry, and that's what you're asking, but it's small business. And I know small business under a lot of pressure right now. But when we're talking about older workers and getting jobs, a lot of those jobs are just going to come from small businesses. People that you've known, perhaps you're a customer at the small business, perhaps you worked with them, but really looking into the small business opportunities that are available in your neighborhood, in your area, in your community. And that's where a lot of jobs are going to come from.
There's not so much a question, but a point from the audience that I want to hear your thoughts about, all of you, which was somebody wrote in, boomers need to define their value proposition more than just sending in a resume. I'm wondering, anybody want to talk about that a little bit? Kerry, maybe you want to start?
Well, I think without question, but I think that should have always been a part of your job hunting mojo, is how you can solve that employer's problem with your unique perspective and your skills. And so when you're in that interview, you're not saying me, but you're saying, I've seen this situation before. I recognize this. This is how I've solved this problem in the past, or I've seen it solved. But it is exactly that. That is critical, your value proposition and how you have the, know how to take care of that right off the bat. One other point I want to make quickly about what Chris was just saying also is, when we say healthcare, that doesn't mean, you could be an accountant, you could be a project manager. It can be any of the skills you had in your previous job that you apply to these industries, those small businesses that need experienced workers who can pop in. Maybe it is just once a month or twice a month or contract, but this is where the job opportunity is going to be. But it can be right in your own wheelhouse. It's just in that industry.
So you're working in healthcare, but you're not necessarily a doctor or a nurse.
Precisely.
Right. Yeah. Catherine, what are you hearing from employers about what they're looking for, if they are hiring at all this year? And it could be part-time or full-time.
Okay, and this is more anecdotal than survey-based. Because I want to acknowledge the frozen situation, but employers are still hiring. The economy and the workforce, it continues to be dynamic. I have come across, just in my travels, employers that are having a really hard time finding people, and so they are out there. And is especially in areas, and we've touched on healthcare, but I'm going to call it industries related to population aging. And we've got a critical mass of baby boomers who are getting older. We have the silent generation who's getting even older. They need access to products, services. It could be types of care, but things people need. And first of all, it's a big opportunity for entrepreneurialism, but also for employers to be able to attract people to work in those types of businesses. They're having a tough time. So it isn't necessarily being a doctor or a nurse or a nurse practitioner. It goes beyond that. A growing part of the population that has a demand for products and services, some of yet which to be invented, that is just not there. There's greater demand than there are such services and supplies available and employees or workers to be able to fill those jobs.
We just have about a minute left before I'm going to turn this back to Doug. And there are two questions that I wanted to be sure we got to. One is question, and maybe this is mostly for Catherine, but feel free, Kerry or Chris. Why aren't more employers doing more to help older adults find work or to phase into retirement? I know you've talked a little bit about phasing retirement, but it seems like not that many are saying that they're doing very much for people as they get older, and it's particularly about working in retirement. Basically, they're saying, well, what we're doing is we've got a 401k. That's all we need to do to be helpful.
Okay, and I think if we step back and look at employers, they're navigating they're navigating the economy, their own profitability, a changing environment, workforce, their own workforce, and as things in their totality, that topic may have not risen to the top of their priority list, but I'm optimistic. I see the indicators that employers are realizing here's untapped potential, an important part of our workforce, and we want to attract and retain those employees. And I will say, in terms of helping workers prepare for retirement, many employers that we survey, in fact, a majority, do feel some responsibility helping them. But I do want to leave you with a disconnect, because this is just coming to mind with our AI conversation, is we're seeing large numbers of employers saying they're implementing AI or they've already implemented it. However, they are falling behind on their professional development programs, meaning that they're implementing new technologies, but they don't necessarily have the training programs in place to be able to really leverage those with a workforce that knows how to use them. That applies for older workers, but it also applies to workers of all ages. So that's a big sort of employer-worker disconnect. And it's an area of opportunity for job seekers if you can help bridge some of those gaps.
Thank you. So let me just close my part before I turn it back to Doug with a final question that actually comes from Doug. And it's really something that I think a lot of people in our audience will find helpful. And that is, what should professionals and groups that are supporting older workers and would-be entrepreneurs be doing to support their clients in this environment? Anybody?
I would say the number one thing is, if there's any way you can get older workers in front of employers who are looking for workers, if there's any sort of meetup, a connection where they can actually, it's not just in the Ethernet, but a real situation where employers can actually meet potential employees, and then also skill building opportunities, virtual learning opportunities are critical. But I just think that the magic happens when you can actually connect the employer with the worker, the employer who has opportunities with workers looking. It doesn't have to be individual meetups, but some way of getting them together.
Chris, any thought?
So just, agree with that very much. But the other thing I just gave a talk recently, to the local Rotary on this very topic. And I think getting out there, and I'm sure everybody does that, but getting out there in the community and the Elks group, the Rotary, all these groups that bring, have small businesses there, and tell this story and get the message across and answers people's questions. And then get their cards. And then when someone comes to you and says, I lost my job or I'm looking for something more to do, you can send them to some of those people. But I think this is part of going to the institutions in your local community that can make a difference, who have hiring authority, and who may basically have not gotten the message. And that was what I learned from some of the conversations that I gave recently here in the Twin Cities.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm sorry I don't have time to get to because I'm over time already. But thank you, and Kerry and Chris, for your inspiring and enlightening words. And I'm going to turn this over back to Doug Dixon now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks to all four of you for a very insightful, very meaningful, very helpful, and very informative conversation. Aaron, we won't need the slides. I'm just going to run through a few things in closing. But I do want to remind everyone that we will be sending in a couple of days a copy of the recording, as well as there's been a number of good resources mentioned, and I have some good information coming from our panelists as well. So look for that later this week. We do have, by the way, I want to also acknowledge and thank our sponsor, the Life Planning Network, and welcome to their members to this event and to future events and activities in the Encore network. There are some programs coming up, more good stuff coming your way. One I'll mention in particular, two I'll mention in particular, but one next on the 4th of February. And this is in line with a question that came up about what can we do to build our skills. LinkedIn has been making a lot of changes. And we had a workshop yesterday. We have another workshop coming up on February 4th. It's talking about how to respond to those changes, how to shift, how you your presence and how you engage on LinkedIn to take full advantage of the changes that they've been making. So that's coming up on February 4th. On February 18th, we have a program on how to engage younger adults in the work that we do. So working across generations, we have some good, interesting new research that we're going to be revealing and talking more about the topic that came up today, intergenerational connection, how to remain connected. More good stuff. I'll include some links to that in the email that we send out on Friday. But between now and then, have a wonderful day. Thanks again to our panel, and we look forward to seeing all of you again in future events.